Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Charles Schwab Challenge Initial Research Show. What an exciting PGA Championship. Almost got the winner across the finish line, at least for me. I had an outright on Bryson, but if you did not see social media earlier, it was still a very, very successful PGA Championship for me, despite no 6 of 6 lineups. That's what an 80% exposure rate to a 6.5% owned Victor Hovland will do for you. I had Victor Hovland in almost all of my lineups, like I said, 80% exposure. Of course, he finishes solo third. Rory was very high on him. He finishes in the top 15. Had plenty of Xander as well. And the mad scientist play, Matt Wallace did end up working out, although he did back up a little bit over the weekend. I hope you shared in the success of the PGA Championship. Did you have the Xander outright? How were your DFS lineups? Would love to be able to shout out any members of the community that have success. So please jump in chat and or leave posts in the comments if you had success. But we move on to Fort Worth and the Charles Schwab Challenge for another pretty big event, although it is not a signature event. A lot of the players from the PGA Championship have decided to play at Colonial this week. Pretty excited for it. We're going to try to continue the momentum that we have gained from the PGA Championship. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where every week I post research on the PGA Tour, generally around some course statistics, pattern of previous champions of the tournament, the players who fit the criteria or the pattern that I have found for the week. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. So you would have seen all of the exposure I had to Victor Hovland, the plenty of Xander, Rory plays, all of that. Again, the Bryson outright that almost hit for us. Although I did have a few outrights that were quite bad. Denny McCarthy didn't come through nearly as well as I had hoped he would play. But if you want to see those pieces of information every week, that is the betting cards and the top player usage in the DFS contests, then give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation, and he continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of course history, recent form. And if you're a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, by the way, you're going to be able to join us in his Substat chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk over there. We talk about game theory, our favorite areas of the price board, players that we're fading, although very nervous to fade, any top 6K or even 5K plays. So you don't want to miss out on that great discussion that happens every Wednesday night. And the only way you're going to be able to join us, again, is if you are subscribed to his article. Lastly, we are live. Chat is open. In addition to any of the PGA Championship narratives that you want to talk about, I mean, what's the biggest storyline for you coming out of the PGA Championship? Is it Xander winning his major? Is it Scotty and all the commotion from Friday morning? Justin Thomas, was it the golf course? Did you like Valhalla as a major championship venue? And again, any success that you have, feel free to put it in the chat or in the comments. Would love to be able to shout out community members who have success. And it doesn't have to be about golf. Did you have the Preakness winner? I don't know if many people followed the Preakness, but Mama Call actually had the Preakness winner this week, so she had a little bit of success as well. So any success that you have, feel free to put it in chat in the comments. It does not have to be just around golf. And then for this upcoming week, what do you know of Colonial Country Club? Who do you think is your early favorite? What kind of statistics do you think play well here? All that good stuff. So let's do our initial research for the 2024 Charles Schwab Challenge. And we start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. Center my camera. We are in Fort Worth, Texas, at Colonial Country Club. And the biggest thing with Colonial is that this tournament has hosted this event since 1946. So Colonial has been seen every single year since 1946. This is the longest running event on the PGA Tour being held at the same location. Of course, you've got some stalwart events like the Players being held at TBC Sawgrass. Waste Management's been going for a long time. Course of the Century, Tournament of Champions. But this is the event. The longest running continuous event at the same location on the PGA Tour. As I mentioned, we are in Fort Worth, Texas at Colonial Country Club. It is originally a John Bredemus and Perry Maxwell design, so nothing to look at in terms of architect filter in Fantasy National. Colonial is a 7,200 yard par 70. I mean, just barely over 7,200 yards. So we're not going to take a look at short courses, but it is certainly on the boundary of being classified as a short course. But do remember that this is a par 70. So it actually is, I can't say long or even average length, but it's not as short as you might think because it is only a par 70, not a par 72. Stimp measuring 12 to 13. That would be fast, maybe even lightning if they do get to 13 on the Stimp. Colonial, about the average or about the same size of greens that we just saw at Valhalla, about 5,000 square feet on average. That is small by PGA Tour standards. We have 6 holes with water in play. Not a whole lot of fairway, but also not a whole lot of rough either. And we are on bent greens again. However, we are not. We are on a different subclass of bent or a subtype of bent. These are A4 bent, as I believe Valhalla was Dominator. Although I would have to go back and check. But these are A4. But again, without having an agronomy degree or anything like that, we're just going to be looking at bent grass greens this week. The fairways are Bermuda. Rough is a Bermuda grass mix. Not kept overly long. And there's a look at Colonial Country Club. Again, pretty straightforward course, especially since it has been seen consistently all the way back to 1946. So no real surprises. And you will probably notice that this is indeed last year's tournament fact sheet. They have not put out this year's tournament fact sheet yet. So I'll make sure to take a look at that tomorrow and see if there are any major changes. But Colonial's been pretty consistent year over year. So again, the big takeaways: 7,200 yard par 70, fast to maybe even lightning bent greens, and we'll check on the weather tomorrow to see if they've had any rain, if the course is going to be soft or whatnot. Not a whole lot of fairway, but also not a whole lot of rough, and 6 holes with water in play. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National and the players that are, at least so far, committed to playing in the Charles Schwab Challenge this year. Do note there have been 3 field changes since the field was announced Friday. Olin Brown, a historical champion, won before 2000. So I know it's not the correct terminology, but kind of grandfathered in if he wanted to play. He has decided not to. Nick Dunlap and Stefan Jaeger have also decided not to play this week, and that's why you see the stars there. Otherwise, again, a pretty darn solid field for the Charles Schwab. Scotty Scheffler is committed to playing. Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Denny McCarthy, Adam Scott. So a lot of big names. Tony Finau, Jordan Spieth. A lot of big names have decided to tee it up, or at least so far have committed to playing this week in Fort Worth. You know, the obvious storyline around Scotty, you know, all up in the air. But I imagine that the charges will be dropped. That will be my guess as to what happens. Nothing to do with length of course filter, and we're going to hold off on the difficulty as to look at the course breakdown and figure out how Colonial has played over the years, get a feel for the course in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. This being a par 70, we only have 2 par 5s in the usual allotment of 4 par 3s. First thing I like to do is take a look at where the 9th and 10th most difficult holes are, figure out where par falls. Where you see the 9th and the 10th are just slightly over par. The 11th hole is where par actually falls here. Would signify average in terms of difficulty, at least based on purely on the holes. It would say that it is maybe slightly on the more difficult end. But the 2 easiest holes on the course are actually at the beginning. So a very gentlemanly handshake, if you will, to the start of Colonial. The par 5 first, about 4/10 of a shot under par. But then you fall all the way to 1500ths. I mean, even the par 5 on the back 9 does not play terribly easy. It's a good birdie chance, but not a lot of eagles because you see the length, 635 yards. So not a whole lot of very low scores here. You still do have some scoring opportunities, of course. Par 5 first. The second is fairly easy as well, 1300ths. But then you fall into the single digits, 800ths, 300ths, 200ths. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, there is one very difficult hole, par 5 fourth, plays to a quarter of a shot over par. But then you also fall quickly into the 1500ths and then the single digits, 1300s, 1200s, 900s, 500s. To me, this has been an average difficulty style course. If the wind is up, you might get some more difficult rounds. Or if scoring is, has a good conditions, you might get some easy rounds. But to me, this has always been about an average difficulty course. And it's kind of being backed up, at least in the scorecard. We'll see further down with the scoring distribution how it checks out, and we'll also check the historic conditions here shortly. Strokes gained by shot type, about a regular distribution here. Approach a little bit more so than putting. The off the tee is outweighing the around the green by a decent factor, so slight ball striking lean, but about average here in terms of your expected distribution in terms of shot types for your top 10s. Your top 5s, much the same, although the off the tee is kind of distancing itself from the around the green. And then for your winners, it actually is a ball striking course. I know putting rises a little bit, but that off the tee consistently rises as you move up the leaderboard, top 10s to top 5s to winners. We look at average strokes gained by hole by par with only 2 par 5s. Yes, they are technically the highest strokes gained, but they're going to be mitigated a little bit because there's only 2 par 5s. So remember that through this week, only 2 par 5s. So for your top 5s, par 4s, par 5s still, and then for your winners, much the same. I'm a little bit surprised to see that the par 5s are still as highly or as distanced from the par 4s as they are. So we'll really dig into that tomorrow in the Data Dive show. But with only 2 par 5s, I can see them being mitigated somewhat in importance and emphasizing the par 4s since we have 2 extra of those this week. We move back to that whole composition here at Colonial. 3 of our 4 par 3s fall between 175 and 200. And then we have the extremely long par 3 That is the par 3 fourth, measuring 247. All three others, pretty darn long, all measure 190 plus. We've got 199, 190, and 192. So you could see a few of those on occasion fall into the 200 to 225 bucket. But we'll see how often they play in this range again tomorrow in the Data Dive show, whether this is the range of par 3s we just kind of want to focus on. We have two short par 4s measuring 350 to 400. The majority of our par 4s, 7 of the 12, measure between 450 or 400 and 450, so more than half. So again, we'll check this in the Data Dive show tomorrow, but at least an early lean would be to focus on the players that excel at this range of par 4s. We do have a few long par 4s, 3 of them from 450 to 500, and then our par 5s are split evenly between 550 and 650, one on each side of 600 yards. Approach shot distribution, majority of approach shots are pretty mid-length here, anywhere between 125 and 175. In fact, 25% of our approach shots at Colonial generally come from 150 to 175. And these two ranges are the most, are more than the tour average. So probably an emphasis on mid-range irons, I guess. At least mid-range by definition of professionals, 9 irons, maybe some pitching wedges, maybe some 8 irons in that range. Historic cut line, this tells you a lot about how difficult generally a course is. You see a lot of times in the past 3 years it's been +2. It's been all the way down as -1. That would be pretty darn easy. It's been as high as +5. That would be pretty darn difficult. +2 is probably average, maybe a slight bit on the difficult end of average, and that's where the majority of the cut line has been. Scoring distribution, however, the birdies are quite a bit higher than the bogeys. You got 18% birdies versus 15% bogeys. The Eagles bar is absolutely non-existent. Your real only Eagle chance is on that par 5 first, considering the par 5 on the back 9 is 635 yards. The doubles bar, somewhat visible. So stack up the scores that are under par against the ones that are over par. You're going to get some that are you're going to get a slight lean to under par. Again, all of this is pointing to about average in my mind. Driving accuracy, much less here. I don't think players really tend to mind being in the rough, considering it's not kept overly long. However, the green regulation percentage is lower here than the tour average by about 1.5%, maybe close to 2%. Scrambling, much more successful here, so it's not as difficult. 3 putts per round are not a big factor around Colonial. Distance is not a big factor at all. There are a couple of forced layups around Colonial, so distance is not a big deal. But it is odd to see driving accuracy and driving distance both be below tour average. So perhaps that is an emphasis of off the tee. Again, we'll take a look at that much more tomorrow night. We'll take a slight look of it tonight. Proximity, this does make a lot of sense considering these greens are pretty darn small by tour standards, much closer to the hole, about 3.5 feet or so if you're hitting the green in regulation in terms of proximity. So there's a look at Colonial from a scorecard and graphical view. Before we go back to the players in the field this week, let's take a look at the historic conditions real quick. Now, last year played difficult every single round. 2022 played difficult as well. So it has toughened the past couple of years, at least scoring relative to par. 2021 was, on the difficult end of average. You see, 2020 was average. 2019 was difficult. So probably a little bit more difficult than I was giving it credence to. I am more so remembering, more in the mid-teens in terms of the average of difficulty. But we've only had one round of easy two rounds of easy versus several rounds of difficult, and 7 of the 8 rounds the past 2 years have been difficult. So perhaps that is me needing to adjust my thought process of Colonial. I have never thought of it as difficult per se, but hard to ignore at least the past 2 years what it has been. So with that, in rounds that are difficult relative to par in the past 2 years, and of course the PGA Championship just concluded a couple hours ago or so that data is not in here yet. Your top performers in rounds that have been difficult relative to par the past couple of years: Scotty, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Ricky Fowler, Colin Morikawa, Denny McCarthy, Akshay Bhatia, Siwoo Kim, Christian Bezuidenhout, and Jordan Spieth. No length filter. We'll take a quick look at a couple of things. I do think off the tee is going to play a pretty decent factor, considering that we saw the average driving distance is less than the tour average, and the fairways are more difficult to hit than the tour average. So in the past 3 months, I'm going to start using the 3-month filter, just because we've got enough data now in 2024 that I think using the 2024 calendar year would be a little bit too much. So in the past 3 months, our top off the tee players have been Scotty, Keith Mitchell, Toasty, Kevin Yu, Minwoo Lee, Siwoo Kim, Jordan Spieth, Chris Kirk, Mav McNeely, and Jimmy Stenger. On the same vein, our top approach players in the past 3 months, or 36 rounds: Scotty, Tom Hoge, Ryan Moore, Keith Mitchell, Akshay Bhatia, Siwoo Kim, Aaron Rai, Austin Eckroat, Lucas Glover, and Patton Kizzire. One thing I do want to check, as I forgot to when we were here, looks like they have got fast as the listed green speed for the past 3 years. They had a little bit of average, but it's been fast. It's never been lightning, so all I can go by is what Fantasy National has classified. So we're just going to look at fast bent, and if they are indeed lightning this year, that'll be a change to what it has been historically at Colonial. So in the past 2 years, on fast bent greens, our top putters have been Denny McCarthy, Seabez, Christian Bezuidenhout, Harry Hall, Brendan Todd, JT Poston, Mav McNeely, Max Homa, Keegan Bradley, Victor Hovland, and Matt Kuchar. There's our top 10 fast bent putters of the past couple years. The only other thing we can take a look at, as we'll really dig into the data tomorrow on the Data Dive show, because of the plethora of par 4s that measure 400 to 450, this is probably a good kind of big picture view statistic to take a look at as we prepare perhaps some wagers when the odds boards come out tomorrow, or when the pricing comes out in DFS, who some players are that we might want to key in on. So in the past 3 months, our top par 4 performers from 400 to 450 yards have been Matt Kuchar, Mac Meisner, Justin Lauer, Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, Ryo Hitsatsune, JT Poston, Akshay Bhatia, Peter Malnati, and CT Pan. So again, perhaps give these players a little extra consideration in any wagers you might want to make tomorrow, or when the pricing comes out, be mindful of their pricing. as at least from an initial look, it appears that they should play Colonial well based solely on the fact that there are so many par fours from 400 to 450 yards. All right, speaking of playing Colonial well, let's take a look at the tournament history or the strokes gained total page view here. Again, 2020 might be a slight outlier considering it was played in June due to the fact that 2020 was the year that it was. Normally, the Charles Schwab is played in May, or mid to late May, so maybe a slight outlier, but it was still played at the same course, relatively the same time period. So we are going to look at all 5 years here for Colonial. Your strokes gained total leader, probably no surprises, Jordan Spieth, Texas native, Dallas native, 4 top 10s, including a runner-up in 2021. He did miss the cut last year, so 4 for 5. Tony Finau, similarly, 4 for 5. 2 top 5s, including a runner-up, another top 20, and a missed cut. Some other players who have played extremely well. Colin Morikawa, 4 for 4. Daniel Berger's 4 for 4. Scotty Scheffler's 3 for 4. Does have 1 missed cut, but a second and a third. Justin Rose, 4 for 5. Our defending champion is Emiliano Grillo, who's played well here. Max Homa's played well here. Brian Harmon, Andrew Putnam, much more boom or bust, if you will. Third, top 15, a top 30, but 2 missed cuts. Brendan Todd's played well here. So different ways to get around Colonial. Scheffler, I mean, the ball striking premier, yes, but he has some distance. Morikawa does not have distance. He is an elite iron player. Spieth with the short game. Putnam, Brendan Todd with the short game and the putting. So many, many ways to get around Colonial. Not one style truly excels here. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, players who have not played well here at Colonial the past 5 years. Sam Ryder, 0 for 4. Kevin Tway, 1 for 4. Michael Block, the block party at Valhalla never got off the ground. Did not play well here last year. Garrett Higgo, 0 for 2. JT Poston, 1 for 5. But the one cut made was a top 10. So extremely volatile for JT Poston, but mostly negative. Tom Hoagie's only 2 for 5. KH Lee's 2 for 4. Bo Hostler, 3 for 4, but still negative in terms of strokes gained. Other perhaps notable players here, Taylor Moore off a very successful PGA Championship, 0 for 2. Denny McCarthy's only 2 for 5 here. So something about this course he does not like. Doug Gim, 1 for 4. Matthew Neesmith, 3 for 4, but 3 very poor made cuts and 1 missed cut. Nate Lashley's only 2 for 5. Chris Kirk's 3 for 4, but pretty middling in terms of success. Norlander's been pretty bad. Damon's only 3 for 5. So there's a look at the players who have and have not played Colonial all that well. So with that, let's move to Microsoft Excel. A little bit of a shorter show this evening, but such as it is, let's cover the players who have played the past 5 years at Colonial, see what they have been doing well as we head into our more data-intensive portions of the week starting tomorrow. So you see Harry Hall, he's only played 1 time, finished 3rd. Paul Haley only 1 time, finished 5th. Because this course has been so consistent on the PGA Tour, I am actually going to remove anybody who's only played it once or twice. I want to see the players who have played here consistently, at least half the times in the past 5 years, what they've been doing well. So you see Victor Hovland, 3 for 3, average finish of 20th. Colin Morikawa is 4 for 4, average finish of 21st. Spieth, your strokes gained total leader. Finau was up there. So these guys who have played Colonial consistently and have played it consistently well, what are they doing? So the first thing that sticks out to me, look at all this in approach. Now, Victor Hovland has been great with the approach, but Morikawa, Lucas Glover, Berger, Finau, Seabez has hit his irons very well here. Woodland and Griot have hit their irons very well here. So if you look at players that we're probably going to have to go down to the top 50 here just to have enough players. Because if we only go to the top 40, that's only 11. So not a whole lot of consistency between our top performers. You saw Jordan Spieth, 4 for 5, 4 top 10s and a missed cut. So it's not like it is direct correlation. Tony Finau was 4 for 5, a couple of top 5s and a missed cut. So there does appear to be some volatility from year to year. But if we look at the players who have averaged a top 50, off the tee is about a 0.6. Much more positive up in this range, so it is backing up what I was saying earlier a little bit in terms of the off the tee being a little bit important. But other than Tony Finau, there's not a whole lot of high numbers in here. If you only look at the top 40, it's a 1.1. So perhaps not the biggest deal in the world. It is really about this approach. Going all the way down to the top 50, it's a 1.7. But if you cut it off at Gary Woodland in the top 40s, it's a 2.6. So pretty high. Pretty high. Around the green, not a big factor at all. About even, actually. It's about a 0.1. 0.1. So not a big deal. Not a factor, I think, this week at Colonial. And putting, maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot of emphasis. Right about in this 1.2 area. So maybe a little bit more than off the tee in terms of the elite players who have played at elite over the years, but not a whole lot of direct correlation. And you see that Morikawa has not been great with the putter here. Glover has not been great with the putter here, and yet they still have a lot of success. So it really is about the irons here at Colonial. Moving into distance, doesn't appear to be a big thing. You're slightly above field average when factoring in the top 40. If you go all the way down to the top 50, it's actually negative. It means it's not a factor at all. It looks like it's these greens, which would make some sense. These greens are small, at least compared to the tour average. Because I don't think the rough is really all that difficult to play out of, but there's some pretty decent numbers in the good drives gained too. So as we go through the show tomorrow night, we'll have to pay attention and see if we want to look at good drives gained or if we want to look at greens. This is a 1.8. That's a 2.2, so maybe a slight lean to the greens, but the greens are generally higher anyway. Interesting. My lean right now is greens, but I could absolutely see in good drives gained being something as well. Looking into scoring, with the majority of rounds being difficult like we saw, that would lead me to believe that the bogey avoidance would be more important, and look at that. More players positive in terms of bogey avoidance at the upper end of the I can't say correlation, at the upper end of the range of players playing well. You actually have some bigger numbers in here too. Yes, the biggest is a 4.5 in birdies from Spieth, but you got a 4, 3.5, 3.5 in the bogey avoidance. Looks like it's much more consistent as well. I'm thinking it's probably going to be the bogey avoidance we want to look at. Moving on into par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Like the par 3s aren't really a big deal at all. It's a 0.5. The par 5s, 0.6. Again, it's all in these par 4s. Not a single player who has averaged a top 50 and played it consistently, played Colonial consistently, is negative in these par 4s. Pretty big deal, I think. Looking in these specific ranges, maybe 175 to 200, maybe. but you have data in all of these. You even have some less than 175 yards, when the shortest on the scorecard is 190. So they do shorten them, they do lengthen them. Probably looking at just total par threes, but we'll clarify it tomorrow. Par fours, yeah, a lot in this 400 to 450 for sure. Look at that. Only one player negative in the range of par fours, in fact. So par fours are total par fours will be important, but we might be looking at a situation where we'll put quite a bit of emphasis in just the 400 to 450, especially considering how well the best players consistently at Colonial have played these length of holes. And then par fives, there's a little bit in here, but nothing in terms of direct correlation really. They're all just roughly roughly good. They're not elite, just kind of good in the par fives. Taking a quick look at proximity. These two ranges. No, I'm sorry. It was these. No, it was 125 to 175. Yeah, it was these two ranges. Look at that. So your three best average finishers, year over year average finishers, they've been elite at this course from those ranges. So perhaps that is something we want to look at. Now the 125 to 150 falls off a little bit because the next three are negative, but you got some good performance in here with the 150 to 175, which would make sense because that's where the majority of approach shots come at Colonial. So perhaps we're looking at a course that really emphasizes a specific range of proximity, which would be 150 to 175. But that is all I have for you all this evening. Of course, be on the lookout tomorrow when I really dig into winter form, try to find some patterns. I've been deep in the tank. You can see I've been sorting some metrics and highlighting and all that, so I'll make sure to go into that tomorrow. But be on the lookout tomorrow during the day over on social media as I put out my research, find the pattern of the previous winners here at Colonial, the players in the field that fit that criteria. I'll post that to social media. And then tomorrow, we're going to really dig into the weeds of the data for Colonial and the Charles Schwab, figure out, if that range of par 4 really is the be-all, end-all. Do we want to separate out that range of par 3s that has 3 of the 4? Are we looking at bogey avoidance? Is off the tee a decent factor? Is around the green not a factor like it seems to be? So we're going to dig into all of that tomorrow in the Data Dive Show. I want to thank you all for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Doesn't happen every week, but we are coming in this week with some momentum after a very, very successful PGA Championship, thanks to a very lowly owned Victor Hovland with a lot of exposure to him, who played extremely well. And again, if you had success, please put it in the comments. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success, whether that's in golf, fantasy baseball, maybe you had the Preakness, fantasy basketball, anything. If you have success and you're a member of the community, please put it in the comments. Would love to be able to shout you all out. Thanks again for all the support, for all the wagers you made this past week for the PGA Championship, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the PGA Championship. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.